But how can you be like, in the South being like, yeah, I really don't like it how people are hiding my slaves who ran away from me. I mean, no. No. This episode of Business Blaze is brought to you by Blinkist. The first 100 people to go to Blinkist.com/blaze will get a week free to try it out. You'll also get 25% off if you want the cost of full membership. More on Blinkist in just a bit. Welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze. This one is all about, I don't even know what I'm recording. The past was the worst. It's another one in our series of The Past Was the Worst. Because of course it is. Horrific laws that we're all glad are gone. I think there was lack of law sometimes. Because I remember it's like spousal rape was like not against the law in the UK till like 1993 or something. And it's like, yeah, if you're a man, you can't be convicted of raping your wife. And it's like, holy shit, 1993 UK? 1993? 1993! I don't actually know if that's true. It's a vaguely remembered fact that blows my mind. What happens here? Danny writes me a script. I'm going to read the script. Sam is going to add in some fine vintage. I don't know why I'm pointing over there. Sam is definitely below me in the basement. FBI, open up! He's going to add in some fine vintage memes. What did David Bowie, Stephen Hawking, Alan Rickman, Peter O'Toole, Albert Finney, and Danny Boyle all have in common?
I don't know.
Well, it's not the fact that Simon knows who all of them are, because there are several in there who I've never heard of. The answer is that they're all reportedly turned their noses up at knighthoods from the Queen. Holy shit. People say no to this. It's a thing. Stephen Hawking's refusal to accept the honorary title was a protest against the UK's lack of scientific funding. Albert Finney described knighthood as a disease which perpetuates snobbery. Except it's something you earn. I mean, granted, it's something that's given to you by someone who has a position just because of their blood, which is insane in its whole right, but this isn't an argument for republicanism. I mean, it is an argument for republicanism, absolutely, but I'm not trying to make that right here, even though I absolutely could, because obviously a republic is a better solution. Please don't cut off my head, Your Majesty. David Bowie claimed in 2003 that he turned the offer down because I would never have any intention of accepting anything like that. I seriously don't know what it's for. It's not what I spent my life working for. We actually made a video on my To Death and Out channel all about like what happens when you get knighted. And it's basically, there's no perks. You don't get any money for it. You just get to say that you're Sir So-and-so, which apparently is amazing for getting restaurant reservations. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of benefits. So, yes. Although it's definitely cool. Like, so, I don't know, if they offered it to me, I'd be like, fuck, yes. I'll take that snobbery. Yeah. Although, now that I just said that I'm super pro-republicanism, and I would, it's not happening. It's not happening. Oh well. It's often difficult to ascertain the truth of the... Also, I'm just a fact boy on the internet. They give it to proper people who do proper things. It's often difficult to ascertain the truth of these claims. In a bid to avoid controversy or embarrassment, the offers are first extended privately by government officials, and the names are only released to the press after the recipients have confirmed their acceptance. So any old fool could claim to have turned down a knighthood. Yeah, I've turned down several. They've offered to me many times. Previously, I was lying. I turned down a knighthood last year for services to YouTube introductions. But I turned it down because I couldn't afford the train fare, and besides, it clashed with quiz night down at the Dog and Bollock. David Bowie had the absolute beginnings of a point when he expressed confusion over what being knighted actually means in practical terms. You get to kneel in front of the Queen like a grovelling peasant and grow an inflated ego, so when people address you as Sir, and you'll probably blag a better table in a restaurant, but apart from that, it's a bit of a hollow title these days. You've got to be such a massive dickhead, though, to be like, oh yes, your table's over here, Mr. Whistler, be like, it's Sir Simon, I'll have you, Yeah, you have to be such a massive knob to do that. Like, I mean, not have a massive knob. You've probably got a tiny penis because you're doing that, and you're obviously insecure about something. A far cry from the early medieval period when being a knight was a noble rank bestowed upon only mighty warriors on horseback. Besert today, Sir Elton John might be a knight of the realm, but I'll be interested to see how well he does on the battlefield with his piano. I can imagine no man less suited for the battlefield than Elton John. It'd be really bad if it turns out Elton John had a military career before he began as a singer, and I'm an idiot. I don't actually know much about Elton John. Some of his music's quite good. Some of it's really bad. It's a mixed bag. Knighthood has already become largely a social rank by the 12th century, but it was still a very different setup to it today. And it didn't come cheap. When you were offered a knighthood, you had to stump up more than just your train fare. You had to dress for the occasion and find the money for fancy clothes and ceremonial suits of armor and all other sorts of crazy shit. Wasn't there something in the UK? There was definitely the cash for honours scandal, which was something about MPs accepting money and them giving people honours, and it's like, well, that's horribly corrupt. Let's not do that. That wouldn't normally be a problem for someone like Roger of Dudley, who owned a fair bit of land back in 1233, but he was obviously a thrifty soul. When he was offered a knighthood by Henry III, his reaction was,
"Is this some sort of peasant joke that I'm too rich to understand?"
"Sod this or a game of soldiers?" And he didn't bother turning up for the ceremony. Off with his head! Robert of Dudley may have given himself a pat on the back for saving a few silver pennies, but in doing so he rapidly invoked a brand new law which made it illegal to refuse a knighthood. A writ was issued which read, "Because Roger of Dudley has not appeared before the king to be girded with the military girdle, the Sheriff of Worcestershire is hereby commanded to seize the house of Dudley and all other lands of the said Roger within his jurisdiction for the king's use." So the king just got pissed that this guy didn't show up to his knighting party and he took away all of his shit. That is petty, Henry III, you bellend. Isn't it great that we live in 2021 where you can just be like, the king was a bellend. Absolute bell. The FBI, MI6! So in return for turning down, there was something else. For the king's use to keep all the cattle found upon them, so that nothing may be moved off without the king's permission. So in return for turning down the chance to become Sir Roger of Dudley, the poor guy lost all of his land and his moog house. This was probably just an example of a snubbed king resorting to extortion tactics, and the law doesn't appear to have stayed in place for very long, so we can be thankful that Stephen Hawking didn't end up homeless on the streets because he gave the Queen a cold shoulder. I'm very disappointed in you, Stephen. I'm taking away all of your including that fancy chair, you bellends. But we should even be more thankful that some of the truly But we should be even more thankful that some of the truly terrible and often barbaric laws from yesteryear have thankfully been consigned to shameful history, although it often took far too long for common sense and chivalry to really kick in. The ugly truth. Your face, really, had to fit if you were strolling along the mean streets of several cities of Western and Midwestern America in the latter half of the 19th century. In fact, your whole body had to fit if you were planning on avoiding the embarrassment and despair of getting banged up by the ugly police. San Francisco was the first city to introduce a wave of ugly laws, which later spread across Chicago, Columbus, Cleveland, Portland, and Oregon, among many others. Of course, they weren't officially called ugly laws. Nobody could be that insensitive. They were originally passed off as unsightly beggar ordinances. How are we going to deal with that homelessness problem? Oh, what we're going to do is just going to make beggars, ugly beggars, illegal. Homelessness is this some North Korea shit?
Nope, stop talking, go to jail.
Following the California gold rush, not everybody had struck gold, and the editorial of the Weekly Mercury complained, San Francisco seems destined to become a city of refuge for all the Lazzaroni of the Pacific coast. I have no idea what a Lazzaroni is. As one treads our streets, the eye is shocked at the frequent appearances of maimed creatures whose audacity is only paralleled by the hideousness of their deformities. Holy sh**. Their audacity? Their audacity? Also, like, calling them creatures is not a good look, historically. I mean, I don't want to, like, push my morals on you, but it's like, oh, man, that creature is f***ing hideous. That is a homeless man. I know. Meanwhile, Alderman James Peavy, what the f*** is an alderman, pushed through his own version of the ordinance in Chicago in 1881 after raising concern over the diseased and mutilated who he felt were making normal people feel uncomfortable. This is golden, I mean shit. In particular, he pointed out the one-legged individual who, with drooping eye and painfully lugubrious countenance, holds forth his hat for pennies, and the fellows who yell, "Bananas!" and the woman with two sick children who was drawn through the carding machine in a woolen mill, and who grinds Molly Darling incessantly on a hurdy-gurdy on a street corner. Oh my god, dude, learn to speak English for sake. Peavy's proposal was to hide these unsightly and disgusting objects from public view. Wait, so there's a woman with 2 sick children who was in some sort of industrial accident, and he's like, we must get her out of sight. She makes me feel uncomfortable. Holy shit. You bellend! In practice, this usually meant that anyone deemed to be far too ugly to be parading in public was arrested and either fined $50, a lot of money in those days, or if they couldn't afford such a vast sum, they were shipped off to the poorhouse, a kind of lunatic asylum for paupers. Brilliant. The whole idea was rooted in a deep mistrust and suspicion over the disabled and disfigured who were getting in the way of the vision of a beautiful new modern city where good-looking people with money should be entitled to feel safe.
My turn.
I mean, I'm not saying that good-looking people with money shouldn't feel safe. They definitely should. But not at the expense of getting, like, industrial accident Mary into the poorhouse, alright? How about we help industrial accident Mary and not her again? Jesus. Not literally.
What?
Widows and orphans generally attracted sympathy and support, while able-bodied paupers were viewed as chronically irresponsible. The diseased and disabled were a more divisive area. While attracting sympathy from some quarters, others felt they were just unworthy individuals, often associated with crime and deception. And peasantry, am I right, Peter? But there were plenty of other cases where citizens were dished out tough penalties for the crime of just looking different.
Damn, you're ugly.
One woman known by the name of Mother Hastings was paid by Portland to leave the city and move to Los Angeles because her crippled hands were too terrible of a sight for children to see. This is terrible. And women in general had a tougher time with the ugly laws, as they could be arrested simply for improper dress, lewd behavior, or making a bold or meretricious display of herself. Opinions finally began to change following the end of the First World War, when brave soldiers returned home from battle missing limbs and scarred bodies and crushed minds, reasoning that it seemed harsh to arrest people who became unpalatable to the eye after fighting for our freedom. No further ugly laws were passed after the war. Disappointing. Those soldiers, straight to the poorhouse. Yet it still took an extraordinarily long time for the laws to be officially repealed in some cities, with Chicago clinging on to the audience in 1974. Yeah. Before 1974, Chicago was brilliant. After 1974, filled with poor people. Is the worst. The last recorded arrest for being ugly occurred in the same year in Omaha, Nebraska, when a policeman tried to arrest a beggar on the grounds that he had some marks and scars on his body. The case was thrown out of court after the judge publicly pondered criminal prosecution under this law would require the impossible courtroom proof that someone is ugly. What is the standard of ugliness? Does the law mean that every time my neighbor's funny-looking kids ask for something, I should have them arrested? Oh my god, Judge, I hope your neighbor's kids don't read. You know it's public record, right? You know that. You know that, right?
Don't care, don't care, don't care, still don't care. I don't care.
But I bet this judge's neighbors were thrilled to bits with that quote. But it dealt the final killer blow to one of the ugliest laws in history. But do you know what's never ugly? Knowledge. And that is why this video is brought to you by the glorious people over at the Blinkist app. It might be a new year. Oh my god, this is clearly the copy from a very long time ago. My bad.
Patrick, you're fired.
It's not always easy to find the time to sit down and read all the books that you want to read. Look, I'm a pretty busy dude, I understand that. It's like, I'd like to read all of the books. People buy me books. I buy books. I go to the bookshop and I'm like, oh my god, yes, let's get that book. And then it sits on the shelf. And I'm always like, okay, cool. I got like 10 books to read. I'll just eventually get through. It takes me like a year to read each book because I'm just busy. I'm just busy, which is a good thing, sure. But it's also great that I have Blinkist, which condenses books down into 50. Sometimes they're even less. Sometimes they're actually a little bit more. It'll be like 19 minutes. Sometimes it'll be 12 minutes. I mean, because if it's 15 minutes, what if the book's 100 pages? What if the book's like the length of War and Peace or something? I mean, it's all sensible. It's all just condensed down to the right amount, about 15 minutes. So Blinkist basically give you 15-minute summaries, as I just said, of all the best non-fiction books. There are over 3,000 of them. That's a lot. And what you do is on the Blinkist app, then you have like, on here, you got like a summary of what's going on in the book. And then you can either read Blinks, which honestly I never do. And that's not because I don't love Blinkist. No, no, no. That's because I listen to the audio version. You just click these headphones at the top. Go on.
Matthew
See, easy. That's brilliant. I just listen on my way to work, sort of like a podcast. It's fantastic. 14 million active users currently on Blinkist. God damn. Getting the best insights and need-to-know info from thousands of books. What was I just reading? Yeah, Black Box Thinking. I guess it went back to the beginning because I finished that one. I've actually read the book as well. It's a fantastic book by Matthew Syed or something. It's excellent. I'll definitely check that out. Also, you get shorter versions of podcasts. That's a relatively new thing. Discounts on full audiobooks. That's also a relatively new thing. These weren't in like the copy at the beginning of the year, I don't think, so this must be really new. I haven't actually listened to any of those yet, but I'm sure they're excellent because the rest of Blinkist is. The first 100 people to go to Blinkist.com/Blaze will get 1 week to try it out for free. You'll also get 25% if you want the full membership. Again, a 7-day trial. Cancel at any time. Blinkist.com/Blaze. I'm actually going to see what those shortened podcasts are like. I think I'll do that after work today. There we go. Thank you. Back to the video. The not so beautiful game. I know that Simon loves it when we talk about football, or soccer, as Americans insist on calling it incorrectly. I football. I have no interest in that sport whatsoever. And football is by far the UK's most popular sport, despite the fact that the typical game largely consists of watching a group of grown men falling over and clutching their ankles in clear visible agony in a desperate bid to win a foul, ruling after being accidentally tickled by the fabric of an opponent's t-shirt. Yeah, and it's like now they have like slow motion cameras, so it's like you'll watch the replay and it'll be like, dude, you're like a foot away from him and you're like, my knee, and it's like he literally didn't touch you. You're just trying to get away with some crazy I think they should just make it all allowed. Like, yeah, you can fight, you can kick each other, you could like kick someone's knee backwards, all sorts of crazy Then it's like, at least it'll be fair and more fun, to be honest, more fun. Must be a big turnover of players because it'd be like, yeah, no, my knee, someone turned it backwards and now I can't play sport anymore. And be like, okay, worth it. Not really. Take sports injuries seriously. It seems odd to think that a sport so ingrained in the spirit of Britain may have technically been illegal to play for hundreds of years, but it's kind of true. God damn, I wish it had stayed illegal. Long before the Football Association set out current rules of the game in the first half of the 19th century, the sport known as football was a very different ball game. The problem was that it didn't really seem to have many clear rules. A typical game played in the open country or the towns or villages of medieval Britain often involved two teams of up to 500 players physically fighting over one football in an attempt to get it over the opponent's makeshift goal line. That sounds way more awesome. The games were so chaotic and violent that property was often destroyed over the course of the game, and not every player was still alive by the referee's final whistle. Oh my god, this shouldn't be like early version of football. This should be Football 2.0. 500 aside, full contact sport, fighting. It's like the ice hockey of football, but with way more people and even more violence.
Daddy, chill.
King Edward II of England was the first to get fed up with the game in 1314, even though he was in Scotland at the time fighting Robert the Bruce with the proclamation Even though he was in Scotland at the time fighting Robert the Bruce, a proclamation was issued which made playing football illegal on the streets of London. It read, "There is a great noise in the city caused by hustling over large balls, from which many evils may arise, which God forbid, we command and forbid on behalf of the king, on pain of imprisonment, such game to be used in the city in the far future." Oh my god. It's like laws are so wordy now and they were even wordier in the past. The ban later went national in 1388 when Richard II decided that everyone should spend their spare time practicing archery instead, as this was more useful when it came to protecting the realm. I don't know. Those football games are pretty violent. It's going to be like some MMA. Over the course of the centuries to come, football was still technically illegal, with a maximum sentence of 6 days imprisonment for anyone who dared to break the law. Henry VIII was very happy to keep the sport labelled a criminal activity in the 16th century, despite proudly owning a fine pair of football boots himself. Henry was just too fat to play football, wasn't he? But actual enforcement of the law was very sporadic over the centuries, with only a few isolated cases ever reported of sneaky footballers receiving hefty fines or sentenced to public humiliation in the stocks. The game of football finally fell back onto the legal side of the pitch in 1845, where it's remained ever since, until I become king and I'll finally outlaw it again. But perhaps something even more criminal is just how badly women footballers were treated during the 20th century, when they were effectively banned from playing the game in England from 1921. Between 1921 and 1971. Am I right, Peter? Not banned by the legal course, obviously, but ruthlessly banned from playing the game on a professional level by the Football Association, who effectively ruled the game without question in England. By the time of the First World War, women's football was just as popular as the men's game, and women had been keeping the spirit of the game alive while the men were out shooting at people. In fact, by 1921, arguably the most famous football team in the whole of England was the women's side Dick Ladies FC. But then the FA and the men suddenly wanted their balls back. The official flimsy reason for the FA banning women from playing on their grounds and effectively destroying the women's game for 50 years was that the female players were being paid too much and not enough ticket money was being donated to charitable causes. That sounds like an excuse. There had never been any obligation for men's teams to donate to charity, so the excuse didn't add up, but there was nothing much that women could do about it. Perfect! Am I right, Peter? The ban was really an effort to reclaim football as purely a male space which was not considered suitable for women. Earlier in 1895, an editorial in the Pall Mall Gazette had concluded, "Women may not, with an advantage to themselves, ride a bicycle or kick a football. These pastimes are beyond them. Let women keep books, write books, paint pictures, ride horses, and row boats, but for the love of heaven, stay them from making sights of themselves on the football field or the object of ridicule on the bicycle saddle." Except they were more popular before this ridiculous ban came into effect. And it was a similar story in many other parts of the world. In 1931, the Norwegian Football Association denied women an opportunity to stage a series of fundraising matches because ladies should not play football. The ladies could get injuries that destroy their reproductive organs. Bro, you do realize that men's reproductive organs are on the outside, and I just feel more likely to get damaged being on the outside of our bodies. It took pressure from the governing body of the European football, UEFA, to finally, I think that's UEFA, right? UEFA, but I'm not sure. I think it is. To finally lift the ban in England in 1971. So the other day I was playing, occasionally I play video games online with a friend of mine who lives in the UK. And he was like, dude, it really shows how much we're into football because England are playing the Czech Republic, where I live, tonight on telly. And I was like, wow, I had no idea the World Cup was going on. And he's like, dude, it's not the World Cup. It's like the Euro Championships or something. And I'm like, oh, I don't care.
Still don't care.
But ever since, they've had a chance to teach the men onto a thing about how to play the game properly without falling over every 5 minutes and pretending to cry. It's nice to see good sportsmanship creep back into the game. Or should we say sportswomanship? No, we shouldn't. Am I right, Peter? Nobody likes a compromise. It would be weird if we didn't touch upon the long history of human slavery in a video about horrific laws from history. Yeah, fair point. But it would also be difficult to do the subject justice without running up several hundred pages of content, some of which might be relevant to today's topic. So I just wanted to zone in on what is often described as the most hated and most disgusting piece of federal legislation in American history, and how maybe the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 wasn't entirely bad news. The Fugitive Slave Act doesn't exactly sound like good progressive news though, does it, Danny? Let's see how this goes around. By the 1830s, the slavery abolitionists in the north of the country were growing into a more powerful force, and the slave states in the south were growing increasingly agitated that the abolitionists were helping to hide runaway slaves who had fled to the north in a bid to find freedom. Those dickheads! In fact, I don't know. I mean, I know it's a different time and all of that. But how can you be like, in the South being like, yeah, I really don't like it how people are hiding my slaves who ran away from me? I mean, no. No. In fact, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 already gave slave owners and their agents the power to hunt down escaped slaves in free states and recapture them. But the Northerners weren't happy about their free states being turned into a battleground for bounty hunters, while the Southerners felt free states were blatantly ignoring the act and discreetly helping the slaves avoid capture. The Compromise of 1850 was a package of 5 bills designed to ease some of the tension and conflicts between free states and slave states, and the compromise included the new Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which was clearly designed to appease the southern side of the argument on runaway slaves. The good news is, I mean, I don't know much about American history, but it's like, then the Civil War happened, right? And the North won. And they were like, South, no more of that, okay? No more! Or something like that. I don't really know. But then slavery stopped. That's good. Good move. Well done. The new act now penalized any officially did not arrest a suspected fugitive and made them liable for 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine, or about $31,000 in today's money. Goddamn. Harsh penalties were now imposed on citizens found to be helping a slave evade recapture, and this included refusing to offer assistance or not reporting a sighting. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, I get it if they're like, I don't get it, it's a horrible law, but there's a big difference between a law where it's like you're actively helping a slave escape, and then it's like them being like, yo, 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 inaction is also a crime. You saw a slave and didn't report it. Like, making a law against inaction is a whole lot more onerous than making a law against taking an action. So that's really extreme. But here's the most despicable thing about the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. Any suspected runaway slaves were stripped of basic legal rights, such as trial with a jury. Officials could arrest a suspect on nothing more than the word of the guy claiming to be their order, and a special commissioner would make a decision without hearing a word of defense from the suspect. What's more, the commissioner would be paid $10 if he made a decision to return the fugitive to slavery, but he would receive only $5 if the suspect was freed. Who thought that was a good idea? No. In theory, this meant that absolutely any black person, even a completely free black person, could be accused of being a runaway slave and then get brought before a commissioner who had a clear financial incentive to side with the accuser. One of the most ridiculously unfair and inhuman acts in history sparked fury and contempt amid chaotic and often bloody scenes in which armed protesters stormed into courthouses in bids to rescue fugitive slaves, with mixed and sometimes tragic results. But arguably, the utter absurdity of the law only helped to speed up the abolitionist movement, and it sowed the seeds for the American Civil War, which eventually brought down the very same hideous legal institution that it was attempting to appease. Good! The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, which was ratified in December 1865. So maybe Senator James M. Mason of Virginia should take some comfort in the fact that the crazy act he helped draft accelerated the abolishment of slavery. Doubted, though, as he was a slaveholder and a champion of slavery himself. But just before his death in 1871, he had resorted to importing white slaves from Canada instead. Holy shit, didn't even know that was a thing. God damn. The Draconian Empire. Two gentlemen by the name of Androcles and Hermes were having a bad week in Athens in the 7th century BC. Following a court ruling, they had been sentenced to whatever, or also known as bloodless crucifixion. That sounds intense. And now found themselves attached to a board with bindings where they would be left to die over a period of several days. Hermes turned his head to Androcles and managed to croak out a few words. "So what did you do, pal?" Androcles replied with the solemn regret, "Murder. Some con man scammed me into investing all my Electrum coins into a pyramid scheme, so I paid him back with a spear in the face. How about you?" Legend. Hermes shakes his head with sadness. "I got caught stealing cabbage from my starving family." Androcles gives him a touch of disapproval. "Well, you've only got yourself to blame then, buddy. You know the law." The word draconian is now used to describe laws or punishments which are excessively harsh and severe, but to give credit to the man who inspired the adjective Draco the Lawgiver, he was a pretty progressive sort of soul who was personally responsible for major legal developments. But he also serves as an example of why you really need to think carefully about every aspect of the law, including the proposed punishments for those who end up on the wrong side of it. Before Draco came along, no laws were ever actually written down in ancient Athens, and only the ruling class were ever even aware of them in the first place, so they certainly weren't much good to the ordinary man. Wait. Only the ruling class knew the laws, so they could just be like, you broke Rule 7. You broke Rule 7. Off with it. You're just doing this because you don't like me. Execute him. The past was the worst. Most legal disputes were private matters that ended up devolving into messy blood feuds, favoring the wealthier and more powerful party who was better protected. Draco of Thessaly was given the task of reforming the city's legal system in 621 BC, and he made sure that his new written constitutions and law codes were posted on wooden tablets and engraved on stone slabs. What a revolution! That the people actually know what the laws are, so they can not break them. Everyone could understand what laws they were breaking. Draco completely leveled the legal playing field as criminal cases were now tried by the state, and each party had a fair chance to represent themselves in court, regardless of how much money or power or influence or cabbages they might proudly boast. Life in ancient Athens improved considerably, and as the new system put an end to blood feuds, crime rates dropped, and a new universal and fair understanding of the law was enjoyed by all. Weird that crime rates drop when people know what the crimes are. Who would have thought it? But if we were being picky, we could say that Draco's punishments for breaking the law was a little bit oversimplistic, because he essentially decided that the death penalty should be dished out for basically everything. Well, not quite everything. Draco was the first lawmaker to make a distinction between murder and homicide. Also, and if you accidentally killed someone in self-defense, you would merely receive a sentence of exile rather than the death penalty. But steal some cabbages, big trouble. But for pretty much everything else, it was death all the way for about 25 years or so. The penalty was dished out for stealing herbs or fruit, falling behind on your taxes, and even idleness. Holy sh**. I suppose it saves the courts a bit of time and paperwork when dealing with the sentencing, but it also seems quite literally draconian to treat a multiple murderer in exactly the same way as a herb thief. Draco's justification for the harsh penalties was that he considered petty crimes to be worthy of the death penalty, and he couldn't really think of a harsher penalty than death for more serious offenders. So, wait, he's just like, why are you having the death penalty for everyone? Because I think that all crimes deserve the death penalty, don't I? Don't I? Simple.
It's like if someone stole milk from your fridge and you call the police and said, hey, someone stole the milk from my fridge. Find out that milk, please. Thankfully,
Draco's successor in the lawgiver role, Solon, retained the death penalty only in cases of murder. The thief. Incidentally, according to legend, Draco the Lawgiver was reportedly killed by adulation after addressing a full house in the Argentinian theatre. His overexcited fans and admirers showered the stage with shirts and cloaks and hats, as this was the custom for displaying your adoration and respect. Draco was bombarded with so much random clothing that he reportedly suffocated under the relentless barrage of fabric, becoming the only man in history to have been killed by a round of applause. That is epic, but it sounds fake, doesn't it? When you get this far back in time... But Draco the Lawgiver should be commended in many ways for codifying laws for everyone to learn and creating a new legal equality. He just went a bit over the top with the punishments. And he wasn't the first or last lawgiver to be guilty of a cock-up. No sh**. Even thousands of years later, it'd be argued that many laws which still are in place today are far from perfect and could do with looking over again. And that sounds like it could be a topic for a Business Place video. What? Thank you, Danny, for putting this together. Legend, thank you Blinkist for sponsoring it. Legend, let's throw some cloaks on Blinkist. And by throw some cloaks, I mean click the link below and go and get some Blinkist. Thank you for watching.